Hello, Namaste, Sat Sri Akal, Assalamu Alaikum, and welcome on your journey to excellence with your adventurous trip on Excel. Another video where we are going to talk about, which is a continuation of the earlier video which I had posted on data validation. Today, what we are going to look at is we are going to go into a little bit more depth and a most important requirement, that is creating dependent lists, understanding what are these dependent lists. We'll see step by step how to create these dependent lists and the application of these dependent lists. So without much ado, let's start looking at the process and the thing. Now what we have here is we have a file, we have an Excel sheet. We are assuming that we are creating this Excel sheet where we are entering the data manually, and what we want to make sure is lists. In the sense, expense category, we want to make sure that the person who or yourself, whoever is entering data in this sheet, enters correct values. They should match, they should be consistent. That we had seen in the earlier video on data validation on the lists. If you have not seen that video, please go ahead and see how to make those lists. But further to this, what we are looking at now is, let's say we have a scenario where we are looking at that there are certain specific expense categories what we are looking at, and based on the expense category we decide what would be the expense details, and we make those choices from predefined lists. Let's take a case here. I have created a master set of lists which are there, where I say that my expense categories would be either HR expenses, research expenses, general administration expenses. Based on the expense category what I select, like for example, if we select HR expenses, what we should get is only wages, allowances and salaries, overtime, training or travel. If we select research expenses, then we'll have only the expenses which are related to research. If we are talking about general administrative expenses, we are looking at only getting values for tickets, travel expenses, items and other things which are there in this list, so that we can later use this data and see what are your general expenses, general administrative expenses in a specific category, in a specific type, like tickets, what is the total cost, or travel expenses, what are the total expenses, items purchased, what are the total items purchased, and so on. This will help us to do a little bit more better data analysis. So let's see how do we do it. Now first of all, what we need is we need expense category, that is a list what we want. Now I will tell two methods of creating this. So first thing is doing the normal method. So what I will do is I will give a name to my expense category data, or we can in fact use the data validation under the data tab, data validation tool, and say data validation, and we choose list and we say that okay, my list is the expense category list which is there, and I click on OK. So we get this list. Based on this we want the expense details. Now if we follow the normal method, I'll just select some of those rows and I go to my master list and I select which one should I select. Now the challenge here is, if a person selects a research expenses, in the expense details I want only research expenses, that is in column G. Then we have this. So what we do is we first of all go and give a name to these items which are there in my sub list. So these are my sub items. So for HR expenses, what I will do is I will highlight this data. I will go to my formulas tab, and in my earlier videos I have talked about something called as name ranges. If you just want to refer to that, please go ahead and watch that video once again, or maybe if you're watching the channel for the first time, you can watch that video. So I will define a name and I will call this as HR expenses. Now I'm keeping it as HR underscore expenses, and if you observe here, I have kept HR underscore expenses here as well, and I will click on OK. What I will do here is, in the expense details column, I want a value which should match the expense category. So what I will do is, in my data validation for expense details, I will go to data validation, I will choose list, and the source should be some data, but then here my data has to be matching whatever has been created or whatever has been selected in the expense category. So I will use a function called as an indirect function, and I will select cell E2. I will remove the dollar symbols here, select E2, close the bracket, and I will just remove the dollars. I will not fix it because I need to copy it down further, and I click on OK. So I will change to HR expenses, and when I come to expense details, you will see you get wage allowances, overtime, training and travel. Let's try to do the whole thing. So same thing can be done for research expenses, general and administration expenses. And if you observe the expense category, I have named it with HR underscore expenses, research underscore expenses, general administration underscore expenses, just for one reason, because if you remember, in name ranges we cannot give spaces and we can only give one special character, that is the underscore symbol. So to maintain that, I have kept the expense categories as HR underscore expenses, research underscore expenses and general administration expenses, because my indirect function refers to the value which is there and refers to the name of the range. In this case, the current scenario, what we have done, we have added HR expenses and we have only these 4 expenses. Let's say I add another expense here, test. But when I go to my HR expenses, when I go to the expense sheet, I select HR expenses, but in expense details, I do not get the last value what we just now added, that was the test. So what we have is another way, is either we change our list to that is this HR expense, basically what we have named should go to further. So I go to my formulas, name manager, edit my name range, and instead of selecting $E$6, I can select $E$7. I can extend the range, but that would be not practical, because every time you will have new set of values, you might have new set of values coming up, so you cannot keep on changing them. So what we do is, we say fine, I'm doing it with the next set of expenses, that is research expenses. So what I will do is, I will create this column research underscore expenses in the master list as a table. So I will go to home tab, I will format it as a table, because table makes everything as dynamic. So whenever we will add something new, the table length increases. And then I will name the range whatever is there, not including the header, only the values. I will go to my formulas, I will define a name for it, and I will call it as research underscore expenses, so that it matches my expense category here. click on OK. Now when I come to expenses, I choose, when I now select my expenses, I go to expense detail and I will see what is the problem here. HR expenses is coming, but still the expense detail is the one. So I will have to come down here. I will just see what is the range I have given here in the data validation. I have said indirect of E2. Okay. Now I change this to research underscore expenses, but when I come to expense details, it says research wages, research funding, rewards and test. So in my master list, research wages, research funding, rewards and test. Now I add another one here, test 1 in my research expenses, and when I come back to my expenses sheet, I can select that I have selected expense category here, that is research underscore expenses, and when I see my expense detail, I can see the new value which has got added, that is test 1. So when we use this, what happens is, because we have created a table is dynamic. As you keep on adding data in your table, you will keep on seeing the values, so the new values which are there. In the earlier case, we had not created it as a table for HR expenses. So what was the problem? We had to extend our list again and again. So better option is to create your sub lists as tables, and in fact you can create your master list, that is the expense category, also as a table, so that as you keep on adding new expenses, like general administration expenses is there, you might have some other expenses like direct costs, you might have certain expenses related to your fixed costs, whatever, you can create those categories, and then based on those categories you can create sub categories like HR expenses, research expenses, general administrative expenses. So that is how it will work. So what we will do is, I will just do it once again with general administration expenses, and what I am doing is I am highlighting my general administrative expenses column. I am formatting it as a table. I will name these values which are under general administration expenses. I am not selecting the header. The reason is, if I select the header, that will also come in my drop down, which I don't want. So I will only select the values. I will go to my formulas, define name, and this time I will give it as gen administration. The only thing is, you'll have to make sure the spellings match with whatever is there in your expense category. So gen administration underscore expenses, click on OK, and now when we come to this and we select our general administration expenses in the expense details, I think the name I have given it wrong. I'll just go to the name manager, check what is the name I have given, gen administration expenses, click on close, and I will just come back here. Now I should be able to get, so you can see ticket, travel expenses, item, food stuff, car rentals, student allowances. Now if I change, or if I add another value here, student, let's say stipend, and I go to my expenses, select the expense category as general administration expense, you will see student stipend as a value. So the key point here is, we are not using the normal data validation for the dependent list, we are using an indirect function. So I will show you again, data validation, and we are saying indirect E2, that is whatever is the value in the next cell. So if I come down here, I will just copy this to the next set of few rows for the time being, and I will change this HR, and I will see wage, allowances, overtime, training, travel. Now here why I am not seeing the test is because I have not extended my list up to the test value. But if I choose my general research expenses, for example, you will see all the values which have been added in the thing. So hope this will, I'm sure this would help you in creating and structuring your Excel sheets and ensuring that you are basically trying to reduce errors which are manual data entry errors, and will help you to make better data, better knowledge, and in further videos we'll see how do we use this for data analysis. If you like the video, like it, share it, subscribe for the channel, hit the notification bell so that you get all the notifications for the new videos. See you. Bye. Enjoy your time. Thank you very much for the time being.